We're now going to look at the spark that causes war in Europe. The Great War is what we're on, and we're going to be marching towards war with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Previously, we talked about the 4 underlying causes that are building up tension in Europe. I like to think of these as the indirect causes, things that are causing people to itch to want to fight. Here we have militarism. Kaiser Wilhelm is really building up his military. He wants to show the world that Germany is a powerful nation. Alliances are going to play a key role because you're going to see countries like France and Britain are going to be pulled in. Countries like Russia and Germany even are going to be pulled in to support their alliance mates. And then we have imperialism. Germany was late in the game with imperialism, so they're going to be itching to fight in order to gain some land in Africa and Asia. After all, Britain is the empire that's controlling much of the land in in Africa and Asia, and France is also playing a role there. Germany wants to get some more land, and they're going to have to fight in European soil in order to get that. And then nationalism is going to play a role. You're going to see that briefly. With nationalism, is going to give people the desire to want their own countries, and also to fight to be the best in the world, to be number one. So let's talk about the direct cause, the spark, where I like to use the pinprick that causes the balloon to pop. These are the things that cause tension to grow, the balloon to increase. Okay, here's my balloon. Look at that, pretty good. And militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism cause the pressure in the balloon to grow. So it's so big that all it needs is a small needle with a little bit of pressure to cause the whole thing to pop. So here's the pop of the story. The focus is Austria-Hungary, and Austria-Hungary controls a region called Bosnia. In this region in here you can see, and a lot of the people in Bosnia are Slavic, and Austria-Hungary is not a Slavic nation. So a lot of people in Bosnia and people in Serbia really want to see Bosnia switch over and join Serbia. Here's an example of nationalism. They want to see their ethnic group, the Bosnian Slavs, join the Serbian Slavs. And there's an organization called the Black Hand that is a terrorist group that is willing to see violence in order to get Bosnia to join Serbia. And this is going to happen with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Here's Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That's Sophie, his lovely wife, and then this is also Sophie, their daughter, and Maximilian right there. A little bit of a love story that I want to give because I think it's pretty important to show that this assassination is more of an excuse for Austria to pick a fight than anything else. Archduke Franz Ferdinand falls in love with Sophie. He is next in line to be the emperor of the Austria-Hungary Empire, and because his cousin committed suicide. His cousin shot his mistress in the head and then shot himself in the head, and that's another interesting story. His cousin, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, married King Leopold's daughter, who you know, King Leopold. So there's a lot of connections with the royal families. They marry royal families from other regions, and there's a lot of connections there. Sophie had no connections. She was an ordinary woman. She wasn't extremely rich. She wasn't from any royal family, and they actually forbid Archduke Franz Ferdinand from, I should just say at the time it was Franz Ferdinand, from marrying Sophie. Franz Joseph, the leader of Austria, by the way, you don't need to know any of this part for the test, forbid Franz Ferdinand from marrying Joseph or even dating. And they kept doing it behind people's backs, and finally Franz Joseph, with a lot of pressure from people outside of Austria, said, okay, fine, you two can get married. But none of these children will become heirs to the throne. And Sophie wasn't even allowed to be in public with Archduke Franz Ferdinand in many places in Austria. Basically, I want you to know that Franz Joseph, though, didn't really have high regards to Franz Ferdinand. In fact, I read that when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, Franz Joseph was relieved. The words they used was relieved, with this in mind. So it's not like you assassinated my Archduke, the next in line, I'm really upset by this, it's time for revenge. Nothing like that. It was, I think, a pretext. It was an excuse to go to war with Serbia and even gain more land. That's my opinion. Little side note. I like side notes. Sophie, she lived pretty long. She had 3 sons and a daughter. The one died of being, by the way, she was married when she was 19. Their one child died as a stillborn. The other one was killed in World War II. And the other one died in the Soviet Union camp. So, you know, the tragedies really continue to extend, even not from Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Sophie, but also through their children. This is Maximilian. He was went against Adolf Hitler and was sentenced to the concentration camp called Dachau, which we'll talk about later, along with their other son, who is not in this picture. So, really interesting stuff going on here. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Sophie get married, and they go to Bosnia, Sarajevo, which is about right there, and they end up going for a parade, and here she was allowed to be with him, so he wanted to treat her right. I believe it was their anniversary as well. So, okay, they're in Sarajevo, and in Bosnia, and here comes a member of the Black Hand. His name is Gavrilo Princip. He was 19 years old, they believe, but they weren't 100% sure, so when he does the killing, they don't give him the death penalty. He does die in prison, but again, he's part of the Black Hand, Gavrilo Princip, and again, that was an organization to see Bosnia join Serbia. So what better way to show the violence and go against Austria-Hungary by killing the heir to the throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Gavrilo Princip is an interesting story. The assassination itself, there were many attempts before he actually pulled the trigger. In fact, there was a grenade that was launched and hit the car behind theirs and hurt them, and they assisted to go to the hospital to check those who got hurt. So they could have just left and they would have been fine, but long story short, they find themselves right along this road here, near this bridge, and Gavrilo Princip is there, and Gavrilo Princip pulls out his gun, and BAM! BAM! Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. I don't think this is a realistic interpretation. In fact, it was a lot less dramatic than that. That said, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is shot, Sophie is shot. Sophie was pregnant, by the way. I think it was 4 months. And Archduke Franz Ferdinand says basically the last words, Sophie, 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 don't die. Stay alive for your children. And she dies. And then a couple minutes later, she dies going to the hospital. He dies as well. And so it's kind of interesting. Here's the spot. From this spot is a chain reaction where millions and millions, 10 million plus men and women all throughout Europe end up dying because of an event that occurred here, that took place here. Shot heard around the world, they say. There's the shot. Right there you go. Here's Gavrilo Princip. Moments after the shooting, he took cyanide. He thought he took enough to kill him. The cyanide was old and bad, so it only caused him to throw up. So he would throw up on the ground and stuff like that, and they arrested him. Here it looks like she's going to try to do a right-hand hook and make contact. I don't know if his guy was able to stop it or not. Sorry, I can't answer that question for you. Alright, so here's the chain reaction. Austria-Hungary is using this as an excuse to go in Serbia and to put the smack down on Serbia and to show that they're tough and they want to respond to the Black Hand that are stationed in Serbia. Again, Bosnia is right here. Actually, there's Sarajevo right there. So that was where the assassination took place. So Germany gives them a blank check. You know what a blank check is. Blank check is saying you can do pretty much whatever you want in Austria-Hungary. And Germany gives an ultimatum that you had to do all these certain things, and if you don't do these things, we're going to go to war with you. Well, as Austria-Hungary is getting prepared to go to war with Serbia, because I think that was pretty much a done deal, they already had that planned, and Russia, who is also Slavic, and they're going to get the backs of Serbia. So here comes Russia saying, we're going to support Serbia. Now Germany's like, oh no, you didn't. So Russia's mobilizing, getting their troops ready. It took a long time to mobilize, so whoever mobilized first had a huge advantage. They didn't have a standing army like we do now, as much as we do now. So Germany says, okay, we're gonna mobilize our troops and we're gonna go help Austria-Hungary, and Germany's going to go eyeball to eyeball with Russia. So now we got Austria-Hungary and Germany, okay, getting ready for war with Russia and Serbia. Okay, as Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, that was July 28th. By the way, the assassination was June 28th. War didn't really take place right away, but that's where the declaration was made. By mid-August, though, the battle lines are drawn and the fighting is going to take place. But here it is: Germany and Austria-Hungary got each other's backs, and they're going to go after Serbia. Germany is also declares war on Russia. They want to get a head start, and they know France is probably going to go to aid with Russia because they're allies, and Germany doesn't want to be caught in the middle, fighting a war in the middle. So Germany's saying, hey, I need to fight, and I need to do it in a quick way, a surprising way. So Germany declares war on Russia, declares war on France, and England comes to help with France and declares war on Germany. So to end this podcast, we got Germany, Austria-Hungary on one side, Russia, France, and England, and I guess we can count Serbia on the other side. Okay? Real quick, I'll do it again like a domino. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, Germany declares war on Russia, okay, and France, and England comes to the aid with France to declare war on Germany. That's basically the key points. I'm not going to ask you, to put it all in order on the test. I'm just going to ask you, who did Russia come to the aid to help? Who did Germany come to aid to help? Who did France and England come to aid of the help? Who declared war? Did Germany declare war on France first, or did France declare war on Germany? That's the kind of questions I'm going to want you to look at, to think about. All right, there we go.